Okay, we're going to have to be innovative now in terms of how we manage out the rest of our programme. Art has the ballot paper based on our discussion has been distributed.
It hasn't.
No, it hasn't.
No, it's not yet.
Oh, it's not yet ready. I beg your pardon. I thought it was, but it will be ready fairly soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when it is ready, we are going to have to. I think, stop and allow people to concentrate on the ballot paper and to vote, because otherwise, it's not. Andrew? Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman. Andrew Kinsella. Can I just take this opportunity just to, I think it's worthwhile mentioning that the gentleman who spoke to us from Libya, that some of our best days in Ireland have revolved around sport. And I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate the Libyan national football team on their first ever international competition in winning the football and the Africans Championship only yesterday. So congratulations on that.
Andrew, you must be among the best informed people in the room. So the ballot paper is being worked on, and it will be ready. So in fact, we are now actually bang on time to move to the next session, although it is clear that we have still work to do in relation to voting, which is the critical issue. What it says on your agenda is convention business discussion, what to do with the remaining issues on the any other amendments list. And if I could just maybe summarise, I tried to do so yesterday morning, but perhaps it bears repeating. We were given 8 issues to deal with as a convention, 8 specific issues. We have dealt with all of those. We finished that at our meeting in November. The 9th issue was basically any other business. Sorry, can we... Yeah, could we, sorry, we'd like to, thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Good. There's the exuberance of democracy. It's all very positive. So we were given 8 issues to deal with. We've dealt with them. Reports have been written on all of them. 3 of those reports have been debated, and the remaining 3 reports will be debated over the coming months. The 9th issue was any other business, and we had something like 800 submissions from people who wished their particular agenda item to be dealt with under any other business. We then proceeded to have 9 meetings around the country. Many of you participated in these meetings in the different places and made valuable contributions. And then in early December, we went through a process, a balloting process, a voting process among the members in which you were given a choice as to A, the number of issues you wished us to deal with in the remaining 2 meetings in February. And there was a clear majority that number should be 2, because I assume people felt that you needed a weekend for each particular topic. And as you can see from this weekend, to cover an issue of the complexity of Dáil reform is no mean challenge. But the 2 issues then, having decided it should be 2 issues to deal with, the 2 issues that came out on top were Dáil reform and economic, social and cultural rights. So we will be dealing with that second issue at our next meeting in 3 weeks' time. It's fair to say that the people who were advocating their own issues, the issues they wanted dealt with, were disappointed that their issue didn't actually make the cut. And we have had discussions with a number of these people, a number of these people and groups, and a number of them have, in fact, provided an information note for the members of the convention about their own, if you like, their own topics. And we have shared that note, I think, with convention members. We've also shared a letter that Alban McGuinness wrote to us about an idea he had about, within the context of Seanad reform, an engagement with Northern Ireland. So we're really coming to you to say that this is where we've got to in this area. There was a question raised this morning by Katrina about a matter that, if you like, came up at our September meeting when we discussed citizens, how citizens outside the state might be dealt with, might have rights in presidential voting. So we're not proposing that we make decisions here today. I think we come back, we begin a discussion on this matter today. We come back to it at our final meeting in February. I mean, one issue obviously is whether or not this convention, its current life, is going to end at the end of March. There is clearly a question as to whether a future convention, if a future convention were to be established, if it were to be set up, what would it be asked to do? And might there be some sense from this convention as to what the priority ranking of issues a future convention might like to, if it were to be set up, might like to consider. But anyway, that is a matter where this convention may be willing to express an opinion, but we don't actually have a decision to make. That decision will be made by somebody else, by government and maybe by the Oireachtas. Art, would you like to add, what would you like to add to that?
Okay, I suppose that the question is, we need to tie the convention up in a big bow now at the end of it. So we've done all the issues that we were asked to do, the couple that you chose yourselves to do, but there are a number of other issues which some of you feel very strongly that should be looked at by somebody, whether it's a new convention or by government or something like that as well. So the issues of church and state and the environment and the family and the other issues of morality, etc. So we need to gauge the support for the convention on issues that should be dealt with in the future, or some you may want you wish to express an opinion that these issues don't need to be looked at. So again, like with all these things, you're masters and mistresses of your own destiny. So whatever you would like to do on these issues, there are other issues as well, like such as Katrina raised this morning, that you might like to make a recommendation to government in your final report to say, we think this is important and we think somebody should have a look at it. That was all.
So really, in a way, we're just, as always, we're trying to be entirely open about this process, and for this particular next number of minutes, get a sense from you about where you think we might go on this, or how we might take this discussion a bit further. Angus, I saw you offering, and then Alban. And again, I really would, I know that in this weekend, we perhaps haven't heard as many citizen voices as perhaps normal, and I would like very much citizen voices to be heard if there's anyone wishes to speak. Alban, Angus first.
Yeah, no, I think at the very least, kind of the recommendation from this convention, I know we're not signing off on it here today, should be that a new convention with a new remit would be set up kind of to deal with outstanding issues. Some of those kind of you've already alluded to just there in your introduction. Some kind of were involved in that list that was sent around to prepare ourselves. The fact that so many citizens around the country made proposals means that there are issues there, constitutional issues, and I think we need to address it on an ongoing basis. And I think this experiment in participatory democracy has been wonderful, and I think it could be repeated kind of over time. I think it was a pity that the Seanad and the reform of the Seanad wasn't dealt with at an early stage. We've had the referendum, so now kind of we can look at kind of whether the Seanad, like the Dáil we've discussed today, can be reformed kind of either internally through its own structures, or whether kind of we put changes within the Constitution, and I think they're key ones. Some of the issues will be interesting whether they come up next week in terms of fundamental rights and that, but kind of it was a point I raised at an earlier convention about our need kind of for the strengthening of the human rights protections, and that some of that may be discussed next week. I'm not sure the exact kind of profile of next week, because that is a commitment under Good Friday Agreement. But also the constitutional committees over the years have made those suggestions. Others you've discussed. One that is close to my heart is the needs for the Irish language and the protection of the Irish language. And another one which might be of interest to people, but I think it's be hugely technical, and is the contradictions between the Irish text, which has primacy, and the English text, that there is a contradiction. The Irish language has primacy in the court, and there's quite detailed study. It's not something that we could necessarily go through, but it might be an interest to people just to understand the complexities that constitutions throw up. If we had the likes of, I think it's Pádraig Ó Carúil has made a major study on this, and just kind of that people understand just a word in English and a word in Irish means two separate things altogether. And in some ways we have the luxury of two constitutions rather than one.
Okay, thanks. I actually wasn't aware of that until I started on this work, but I do realise there is a point there. Alban and then Tom.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm afraid because of transport problems, I'm going to have to leave fairly soon. But could I say I absolutely respect the views of this convention in relation to the prioritisation of economic and social rights in the Constitution, and look forward to that debate. And of course, the debate on Dáil reform has been fascinating. As a political party with a particular purpose in terms of trying to bring North and South closer together, we put forward some ideas in relation to Seanad reform, in which we would see the Seanad as being an interface between North and South within the context of the Good Friday Agreement. And we would see Northern representation as part of that process. Now, that's an idea. That's a view that we've been put forward, and you've received that, and I'm grateful to you, Chair, for disseminating that to the convention. I would hope, along with other colleagues who have had different ideas, I would hope that those ideas are not simply forgotten about by government, that whenever this convention gives its report to government, that those ideas are in some way highlighted, not obviously in the same way as Dáil reform or whatever, but that they are not forgotten about. And I would hope that some mechanism would be worked out to do that, so it's not just simply a footnote, but rather something that government will say, well, this is an interesting idea, let's have a look at it. So thank you very much, Chair. I'm grateful.
Thanks, Alban. I mean, just to reassure people, we will, in our final report, very much capture the discussion that has been around some of these issues that the convention has not had the chance to formally consider. Tom.
Thanks, Tom. I'd like to agree with Angus. The reform of the Seanad is something that should be addressed. But our experience of this week, and this table has both parliamentary and citizen members have signed a note suggesting that the subject could have done with a commission, a convention of its own. It's so detailed. And I think the same would probably apply to the Seanad, that you need more than a day and a half for either of them, and maybe 4 weekends might be more realistic. And the other point that Angus made about the primacy of the Irish language, I don't know if people know, but if there's a dispute in court, the Irish language version is always accepted as being the version. Now, if there's a contradiction between the Irish language and the English language version of legislation, and the legislation has been discussed in its entirety in the English language, written in the English language, passed in the English language, and signed off in the English language, and there's an error made in translation, it strikes me as absolutely ridiculous that the error is the correct legal interpretation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Tom. I mean, this comment that you make about dealing with complex issues in the space of effectively a day or a day and a bit is a very real one. And I did, when I addressed the Seanad on the 16th of January, I acknowledged that as an issue that I think would have to be looked at if there was to be a further convention. Aideen, first of all. I see Robert, and I know Ivana has offered as well. Aideen, please.
Thank you, Tom. Obviously, first on my list, of course, would obviously have to be the role of the Seanad and Seanad reform. But it seems to me that apart from that, there are two types of issues, of the remaining issues that remain. Those which flow, I suppose, out of our previous discussions, and those which are sort of standalone issues like the environment, that would be kind of new issues. And in relation to kind of the issues that flow, I'm very conscious that in particularly two of our previous discussions, one on the debate on the role of women in the Constitution, and the other in relation to the role of the status of marriage and same-sex marriage, there was no doubt in my mind that there was clear consensus that the definition of family within the Constitution would have to be addressed. So to my mind, the whole issue of family and how it's defined, and Articles 41 and 42, flow as necessary reform from our existing discussions. So, I mean, I would like to see that reflected in the Convention's final report, that, you know, this is not something that actually needs to be brought up as a new discussion. It has been discussed by this Convention, maybe not as a standalone issue, but that I must say that I think it's critical that reform in this area will have to follow from our deliberations, and I would like that to be identified.
Okay. I mean, I should say that in the response given by Minister Shatter to the debate on that second report, which dealt with the article dealing with the role of women, he did refer to a committee of the Dáil, which were going to consider that report in a broad way. And among the issues, I think, that probably that committee may well look at is precisely the one you're talking about, the definition of the family. I'm going to suggest to take the people that I saw offering, which is Ivana and Robert, and then I think I'm proposing that we take a break to vote. Ivana.
Thanks, Tom. Ivana Bacik. Just to say that I think it would be great if we as a convention could recommend a further process, a further constitutional convention to look at, in particular, the four issues that seem to have emerged as the front runners below the two that we ultimately chose of Dáil reform and economic, social and cultural rights. And the ones that I think are being identified are Seanad reform, church-state relationships and religious oaths, and the issues of the role of the family, the definition of the family, and then finally environmental rights. And, you know, I think all of us feel this has been a hugely worthwhile exercise. I think it's been, you know, it's seen as having had a really important impact on the in terms of reform. And certainly, you know, we've already seen the government promising 3 referendums, I think, so far, arising from the recommendations, and more, as we hope, on the role of women in the home and indeed on the blasphemy provision following our report. But I think, you know, as we heard in the Seanad, Tom, on the 16th of January, when you came in to give the overview of the work of the Constitutional Convention, we do have to see the sort of the final outcome of our deliberations in terms of those referendums being held. And I think that will give, that, you know, the fact that we will see referendums coming out of the work of this convention will give the convention and the process itself a much greater democratic status and legitimacy, and I think a much greater profile among members of the public generally. I think we'll have to be mindful also of a couple of things. First, that net questions are certainly more appropriate to be dealt with in the course of a weekend. You know, something that's more straightforward. Dáil reform is a very difficult one to deal with over 2 days or a day and a half, as we've all found. It has been easier where we're asked to consider something more contained, like the deletion of the blasphemy clause, for example. And the other thing is that I think would be very important in terms of our recommendation of a future convention is the time frame, because we are conscious that certainly the marriage equality referendum won't be held now till 2015. The government, so if we're to set up another convention, it may well be that its recommendations would be directed at a government to be elected after spring 2016, when the term of this government will end. So we'll have to, I think, be mindful of that, and the terms of reference of a future convention would have to be carefully framed to ensure that, you know, that the recommendations wouldn't just gather dust on a shelf somewhere. Yeah. The strength of this convention is we're going to see referendums arising out of our recommendations, and I think any future conventions should have to have that same strength and that same status. Thank you.
Can I just make one small point in relation to what Ivana said? And I absolutely agree that a weekend is a very difficult period of time to look at something broad and complex as something like Dáil reform. But you shouldn't be shy about recommending that we spend a number of weekends. I mean, it could be a simple thing that the government could give us, or the Oireachtas could set a terms of reference with 1 or 2 items and say, come back in a year, and allow us to spend 3 or 4 or 5 months to developing real expertise in an issue and getting down into the depth of it. Because what we do at the moment, we dip our toe in the water, we expose ourselves to experts, we don't allow much time for reflection except a Saturday night, etc. So something you might like to think about. Maybe you do like the quick in and out over a weekend on something like blasphemy, but you shouldn't rule out dealing with big issues over a period of time where you're given the opportunity to develop an expertise and get a real flavour of the nuances of what's involved. Because I really noticed it this weekend, and I know we ran a masterclass on Friday evening to try and narrow the gap between the knowledge that the citizen members have and the politicians as well. But you could have done with more time. I absolutely understand that, and the solution to that is just simply more time.
I'm delighted to know that this is what Saturday night is being used for. You know.
Well, why else would they stay up all night?
Robert.
Robert Dowds, could I strongly support Alban McGuinness's suggestion in relation to a northern representation in the Senate, even if it's not in the formal way that he suggests in his proposal, because what happens in Northern Ireland greatly affects the rest of us. And most of the time, to be perfectly frank, most of us are bored. We think the North has been sorted out and we just hope they just get on with it. And that's grand so far as it goes. But, I mean, there are dangers, for example, to the peace process at the moment, most of which don't hit the headlines at all. And I think it would be very useful for there to be a northern input from time to time into the Senate, even if not necessarily in the way suggested by Alban, though I'm not opposed to it. My main problem with Alban's suggestion is that I suspect that the unionist parties would refuse to get involved. Mm-hmm. But I think it is important that they have some forum to interlink as much as possible with the rest of us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Robert. I want to break actually now to allow you to vote. So could you please vote, and hopefully in about 10 minutes we'll resume this conversation.